everyone. I think we'll give it like 1 more minute just to let people flow in and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everybody. Before I turn it over to Jen, I want to remind our students that next week on October 13th, we are doing the first in our series of the social entrepreneurship conversations. We have a reading that will go along with that. I've sent out the information, but if you need it, just contact me and let me know. And with that, I will turn it over to Jen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abby. So just so I know who's here, is there anybody with you sort of in person at SPH?
Yes. Yeah.
It's Lauren, Lauren Assessing.
Hey, Lauren. Okay, great. I'm gonna try to share my screen and let's see if we can get that working. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna share and then I'm gonna try to put my PowerPoint on. Okay, can you guys see the slide, like the opening slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi everybody. I think I know most of you already, but for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jen Smith. I'm an associate professor here at CSEF. I was excited to be able to just take a little bit of time today to tell you about a new research initiative that I'm involved in. And so as most of you know, I do research on genomics of cardiovascular disease and dementia. And I recently was fortunate enough to become the assistant director for cohort development of Michigan's Precision Health Initiative. And I thought that it would be great to be able to introduce this initiative to you if you haven't really heard about it. And to talk to you a little bit about the data that are available, because I'm a geneticist and a social scientist. So for me, it's really exciting because we have the Michigan Genomics Initiative, which is a great big biobank linked with electronic health records and other kinds of data. But then I also thought for people who are, sort of not geneticists or on that spectrum, the Precision Health Initiative has linked sort of social and geographic data to the electronic health records available in Michigan medicine. And so I think it's really this great resource where you can kind of do genetics research, you can do sort of social science research, you can do health disparities research, socioeconomic research, and really link this in, I think, to thinking about some of the population-based questions that I think a lot of you are interested in. So I'm going to try to do today just sort of like a whirlwind presentation, so a really quick presentation where I'm going to explain to you about all the different types of data that we have available, and then try to leave some time at the end because I also have joining me Janet Hoppe and Anissa Driscoll, who work with the Precision Health Analytics and also with the Michigan Genomics Initiative. And they're going to help answer any questions that come up because this data is kind of here it's available for people to use, and we're really excited to kind of get people interested in using it. Also, as I sort of go through the presentation, if you want to think about sort of research questions or different kinds of studies that might be possible with this data that you might be interested in doing, it would be really great to hear from you, because we are really trying to facilitate, like I said, the use of the data. And so we have opportunities to add new types of data to help establish collaborations and things like that. So hopefully we'll have time for a little bit of discussion on that later. Okay, so then let me figure out how to change my slides. Okay, so today I'm just going to start giving a brief overview of the University of Michigan Precision Health Initiative and the resources that are available through that, especially the different types of data. And then I'm also going to briefly touch on the self-service tools where you can just go in and sort of start looking at some of the information that we have available, as well as HIPAA aligned compute environments that you can actually use for free to analyze the data. And also just want to tell you a little bit about the process for gaining access to the Precision Health Analytics platform. And then I'll go through just a couple of examples of using this kind of electronic health record data for population health research. Just a couple of pieces around how we're already trying to enhance diversity of some of the cohorts represented, and expanding different types of data. And then we can brainstorm a little bit, and then I'll tell you about how to become a member of Precision Health if you're interested. So the University of Michigan Precision Health Initiative is a cross-campus initiative. It's supported by the Provost's office and several of the different schools and colleges across the university. They're really interested in using a population-based strategy and new and advanced tools and technologies to sort of look at genetics, lifestyle, environmental, social factors, and how those really influence population health. And they're trying to create the data resources and the tools and analytics to really accelerate and act as sort of like this idea incubator for interdisciplinary health research. So there are 4 different working groups within Precision Health. Cohort development, which is trying to, that's the one that I'm a part of, where we're trying to look at new recruitment methods and avenues outside of our traditional Michigan medicine bubble, to try to expand the diversity of some of the cohorts that we have, for example, in Michigan Genomics Initiative, where we have the genetic data. So I'll talk a little bit about both of those pieces in a second. We have an analytic team that's really works hard to try to help people get the data and the tools that they need for analysis. And so Anissa is on that team, so she's here, and they are so fantastic. Both Janet and Anissa are super helpful for any of the pieces around cohort development and analytics. There's a side that does health implementation. So this is when we discover something through our Precision Health Initiative. We want to sort of integrate that into clinical care and make that translation available to our Michigan medicine patients. And so the health implementation team sort of works on that. And then there's a side of education and training. So there are a lot of really good talks and things that education and training helps put together. Also, there's a certificate program for Precision Health that's open to any of the graduate students at U of M. So I want to talk about a little bit some of the different data sets that are available. And I think the ones that will be particularly interesting to you are going to be the structured clinical data, which is the electronic health records. And then what they call the socioeconomic, or sort of the geocoded data. And then there's other pieces. I will talk about the genetics side a little bit for people that are interested. And then there are new surveys that are sort of being added all the time. And so we do have pieces of our population that has different types of survey data available as well. So in terms of the electronic health records, I don't know how many of you have actually worked with this kind of data, but essentially, I'm sure you've heard of the way that now at Michigan Medicine, all of your medical records are electronic. And so for the patients at Michigan Medicine, and we have over 4 million people, we have de-identified clinical data on all of the people who have sort of come to Michigan Medicine dating back since 2002. So this is including all kinds of data like laboratory results, any medications that people are on, procedures that have been done, their outcomes, so any kind of diagnoses, vital signs, and sort of more. And so this really is a great place if you're interested in health research to be able to, sort of see longitudinally what is happening with patients over time and also have access to a really rich set of data there. So for everybody, we have these electronic health records. We've also linked the current and past addresses of the 4.7 million Michigan Medicine patients. About 95% of them are geocoded. And also we collaborated with the IRS to pull census data and sort of mapped these geocoded addresses to the US Census, the American Community Survey, working with our colleagues at ISR, and also the National Neighborhood Data Archive. So, so we have a really rich data set here. And some of the different data that we have are things like, in green, we have a set of indices that have actually been approved for, this is sort of de-identified data and is available in Precision Health Data Direct, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. So it doesn't require a lot of well, actually, Anissa, can you remind me exactly the green, the orange, and the other? That would be helpful.
Yes, so the green is the indices that we have been able to de-identify from the socioeconomic data. The orange is what we have in our other self-serve tool. You will need HIPAA compliant storage for that. You will also need a level 2 password for that. Everything that you see here can be obtained, though, if you have proper IRB approvals for PHI, so Protected Health Information Identifiers. And Precision Health does offer a HIPAA compliant storage location. So if you wanted any of these indices, you don't only have to stick with the ones that are de-identified. That's just easier to obtain, but we can guide you through a path of getting the IRB approvals with identifiers, giving you that HIPAA storage for you to be able to work with all of these indices that you see here.
So Anissa, maybe we can take just a moment because I don't think everybody will be familiar with the level 1 and level 2 password that you're talking about. Can you just explain that?
So a level 1 password is just your University of Michigan password that you have. A level 2 is additional access that is normally given to Michigan Medicine researchers and employees, and that just gives you more access to the clinical data that's available. It takes a very long time to actually get a level 2 password. So we have tried to make as much data available to level 1 users when it was previously only available to level 2 users. So the ones that had the higher access. So now all of this data is available to anyone at U of M rather than just Michigan Medicine users.
Great. So most of us are not Michigan Medicine users here. So we would be able to access any of these data, but we would work with you to make sure that we're following all the right protocols.
Exactly. Yep. And if you're interested in any of this, just reach out to me and I can guide you through the whole entire process.
Perfect, thank you. So as you can see, we do have a lot of different pieces here that I know a lot of these indices might be really useful and interesting to people within CSEF. One thing that we talked about a little bit was the census data. And so from there, we can get the proportion of people or the proportion of households that have a lot of these different census type measures that you might be aware of already. So looking at things like education and income level by households or by the people who are in, for example, a certain zip code or things like that, age ranges, occupation, poverty level, and things like that. Using some of these metrics, the three indices that are available without at the least restricted level that Anissa was talking about are the disadvantage index, which is calculated using these metrics here, the proportion of people who are non-Hispanic, Black, females, households needing public assistance, income below poverty, and the labor force. And then there's another index, the ethnic immigrant index, and then an affluence index. And so these are sort of the summary metrics that are more easily accessed and available before you have the more restricted access. And Anissa, I might need your help just a little bit here. So this, I think, is a visualization tool that is created that helps you sort of look at, if you're interested in a certain subset of patients, for example, here is shown heart failure, people with heart failure diagnosis. And then looking at the neighborhood disadvantage index for that cohort within Washtenaw County, within Michigan, and within the entire US. And so you can kind of see here that you can kind of compare your patient population easily with the rest of the demographics within the county and within Michigan and within the US. I think on the top we have the neighborhood disadvantage index, and on the bottom is the neighborhood affluence index. And so what's kind of interesting, I think, about this is that the disadvantage index is actually more toward, like, we have a little bit higher of that population falling into the disadvantaged category than you see when you look across the demographics of the county and state level, for example. But the affluence actually looks pretty similar to what we see in the Michigan and across the US. Anissa, do you have anything else to say about the visualization tool?
No, that's perfect. So we integrated this tool into our self-serve data direct tools, and you're able to compare your cohort directly through there. And then you can also download the raw data that backs these visualizations through our self-serve tools as well.
Yeah, so we'll come back to the tools also in just a moment, because there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of access the data. So we'll come back to that too. This is just a description. So for each of the data types, there's a lot of different pieces that you can kind of look at, as you would probably expect from a really good geocoding of all the census data and things like that. So within, for example, this neighborhood parks, we have things like the tract ID, how many parks are there, the total number of parks, you know, different versions of that, the census tract area, things like that. I think, Anissa, I'm sure there's a really good, lots of really good descriptions about all of the different, you know, data that are in here. And I know that your team is really good at helping people find the data that they need to, if the documentation isn't enough. But I think there's probably a lot of different things, even within each of these subcategories, that people might be able to look at if they were interested here, right?
That's correct, Jen. So we do have within each of these blocks of data in our self-serve tools, we have documentation links in each of those. So you can click on those and it's actually a published link of where all this data came from, how it was defined, and how all of the variables are defined as well. So we do have those available. We're actually working on making the descriptions a little bit more user-friendly for people that don't normally work with this data every day. So hopefully we'll have those in a couple of months here, but we're working on those right now.
Yeah, I was just say too that these data are relatively new, I think within about the last year. So this is a big piece, I think, that was really added to the Michigan Medicine, electronic health records, because I think we can do so much more now with the social data than we could before, because the electronic health record is really very limited in terms of what you can glean about even things like self-reported race and ethnicity. It's very, very general and not super granular. Things like any kind of socioeconomic or sociodemographic variables are difficult to find in there. And so I think this is really fantastic. I'm just going to talk for a minute about the Michigan Genomics Initiative. For those of you who are interested, this started in 2012. So patients would, at that time, the consent was done when people were coming in for surgery. So the initial enrollment was through anesthesia for people who were getting surgery. So the patients that we saw were usually older and sicker. It's highly enriched for different kinds of morbidities and different cases of diseases. So I'll go through that in just a second. At the time, there was a really nice consent document that was developed that was really clear. It's just a little brochure, and patients would agree to give a sample. I think at that time it was blood sample, but we've since moved to saliva sample for some people in MGI especially due to COVID and the ease of collection there. There were some surveys that go along with being an MGI. There was consent to share the health records. There is a recontact consent, so we can recontact people if we have new studies that come up that we're interested in contacting people again, and that we could share the data with Michigan Medicine researchers. And now people outside of Michigan Medicine can use it as long as they have a sort of collaborator who works, I think, with Michigan Genomics Initiative or who is at Michigan. So we've consented over 84,000 participants, and we have genetic data for over 60,000 so far. And then the Michigan Genomics Initiative sort of has been, because it was a very specific patient population, there have been a lot of sort of add-on studies that have really looked to focus on specific subsections of the population or sort of expand the demographics. So for example, the MEND is a metabolism and endocrinology based cohort. There are the MHB2 and PROMPT are mental health based cohorts. MyPact is a mobile technology, and Big Bird is a pediatric cohort. And so, so we're trying to sort of increase the diversity of people who are there. We have been growing at about 10,000 participants per year, especially before COVID. And now we're starting to grow again because we're doing everything virtually. People are able to answer the surveys virtually, and we send them a spit kit in the mail. So we're hoping to keep growing that cohort. The demographics of Michigan Genomics Initiative is the median age is about 60 years. So again, we have sort of this older cohort right now. One limiting factor is that about 88% are of European ancestry, and our big focus over the last couple of years, I feel like is to really diversify, especially on the ancestry or self-reported race ethnicity pieces. So I'll talk just a little bit about how we're doing that in a minute. This is just showing how MGI is really enriched for different disease cases. And so these are older people and for the most part. And we do have an excess of cases because Michigan Medicine is sort of a premier facility across Michigan, or even people from other states come to Michigan Medicine for specialty services. And so our patient population is really enriched for a lot of different kinds of diseases. Cancer is a really big one, hypertension and cardiovascular disease. There are pain. There's a lot of information in Michigan Medicine on pain and frailty. So that might be another piece if people are interested in that. The genetic data available is everybody's genotyped on a genotyping core chip with some exome chip data too. So we have that. We have imputed data for those of you who are familiar with that terminology. We have genotype imputation up to 50 million SNPs per person through the TopMed or the TopMed imputation panel. We also have some whole exome sequencing and targeted sequencing for a smaller number of participants. Also in MGI, we have imaging data. So right now we have chest x-rays, which could be really useful for people who are studying COVID. So there's some really nice COVID data, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but that includes chest x-rays. Right now we have that for over 17,000 Michigan Medicine patients, and we're trying to expand the imaging data that we're looking at. So one thing that we're trying to do is get some momentum around maybe looking at brain imaging in stroke patients. So that's an initiative that we're starting to work on as well. There is survey data. So there's a pain questionnaire, for example, that almost everyone in Michigan Medicine has, about 60,000 people. This was done at the time of their surgery, and then we've been trying to do follow-up surveys on that as well. But I think it might be interesting to some of you because it does have things like life satisfaction, anxiety, depression, and stress. And so I think that could be a great resource to potentially look at the social influences on some of those factors, especially around the time in older adulthood when people are having things like surgery. There is an EPI questionnaire that we have added within the last year and a half. So we have over 5,000 people now, but we ask a detailed battery of some of the things that you might think about, when you're doing an EPI study. Some personal details, health behaviors, sort of a little bit more about medical screening and history. There's a big section on cancer. And then there's also in orange some optional surveys, and most people who do the EPI survey will fill those out also. There's also a big COVID-19 survey that's in there. So, so those might be pieces that you might be interested in as well. And I know that some of you study COVID-19, and so we do have a set of specific COVID-19 resources, including that survey and chest x-ray data, information about vaccinations, and even the SARS sequencing for people who had the virus sequence. So that data is there if you're interested in working with it. Just wanted to spend a minute talking about the electronic health record. So it's a multi-purpose database. So the electronic health record is really designed for clinicians to be able to keep track of, what you have, especially in order for that to be translated into what's billable by insurance, right? And so the clinicians want to put as much information in there as possible, but the main purpose of it was developed for billing. we now have come in as sort of data scientists and like info magicians, and we're trying to, look at that data. But it does have limitations because the primary use has never been for research. So some of the pieces around that is that, it's nice to have this kind of data because it's there, it's available, there's large sample sizes, there's lots of variables. We can get longitudinal data, we can recontact, but because you're all epidemiologists, or most of you, that there's some issues there. So for example, we can't really control it. It's not an experiment, it is observational. And there are a lot of issues around things like measurement accuracy. Ascertainment bias is huge. People coming to Michigan Medicine are going to be different than those who don't. And also, when we get results, like how does that generalize back? So I think Michigan Medicine and MGI are always looking for people who are interested in exploring these issues more. So if you're interested in things like methods development, Biostat has started to do some of these methods development pieces. But these are just some things to think about when we're using the electronic health records data. And I know, for example, that within the Michigan Genomics Institute, Bramar Mukherjee has been studying the ascertainment bias piece. And I think she has a way now to sort of correct for bias in the sampling. So we're working through some pieces around that, but I think these are really good data to use. We just have to be aware of the issues. A little bit on how we get the data. So Precision Health has two self-serve tools. One is a web interface. The top one is called Precision Health Data Direct, and it's a web interface. And you can use that for cohort discovery. So you can try to think about your research question and who's going to fit my criteria in terms of diagnosis, age, medications. And you can kind of see your sample sizes, which is really nice. Then you can also use that web interface to download data into a secure research enclave. And that has associated with it storage for you to store the data that you're downloading. And then you can either analyze it using a Windows-based, sort of a remote desktop Windows-based system, or you can do it through Linux. And there are GPUs available for you to actually use to process the data. If you prefer an SQL-based server, there is a Precision Health de-identified RDW, which is an SQL, but it actually will pull the same data. All the same data is available there. It'll pull that data into this turbo storage, and you can use the same computing environment to work with the data there. So whichever way you prefer, you can access the data. There are a lot of great tools set up. So for example, in Data Direct, you can start with a specific population. And so they're sort of just already there. And so you can just start by adding that population and then filtering from there and looking at what you want to look at. And again, if you go through the Precision Health database server or the SQL server, that all can go into this, the same HIPAA compliant Precision Health turbo storage, and you can analyze the data there. To access the data, Anissa can maybe say more about this if I mess something up, but you need your level 1 password, which all of you should have, and being enrolled in Duo, which I think everybody should probably have that too. We all complete our HIPAA training, our peer certifications. You have to sign a data attestation and send it to PH Data Help, which is the research scientific facilitators for this team, like Anissa and also Kate Smith will get those emails and help you work through things. So we'll send them a data attestation. And then we need to do an IRB application through IRB Med. So a lot of us go through a different IRB, which is called IRB HSBS. I can't remember all the things that it's like health and behavior. But we'll go through IRB Med for this. And and get that approved. And then we also have to be members of Precision Health Initiative, which I'll tell you about how to do that in just a minute. And then all the data stay within the enclaves. I wanted to actually, I'm going to skip forward just a little bit here and tell you just a little bit about the benefits of precision health, and then I'll go back. So if you want to become a member of Precision Health, there's a lot of benefits to that. So you can use all these different resources that we've been talking about. There are also funding opportunities. So there are investigator awards. They just gave them out, I think, for this year, or they're going through the review process for this year, but next year there should be hopefully another call for applications. And it can help you make your research more visible and give you opportunities to you can work as a grant reviewer, you can serve on ad hoc committees, you can mentor people, or for students, you can find other mentors and things like that. So I would highly recommend it. There's a really great sort of seminar series that they do. And so there's no risk to that. So if you're interested, you can join the Precision Health Initiative by going to the website. And then I think I'm going to go back just a little bit. So I wanted to just say a little bit about like what kind of projects can we do with this data. So one thing is that from the genetic side, I'm always thinking about things like gene environment interactions. And so I was finding an example of something that's been done. This was done in UK Biobank, looking at body mass index. And I saw that they had done a genetic score for BMI and looked at the interaction with a census-based index, which was the Townsend Deprivation Index. And they had found that when you have a low socioeconomic position or like a high Townsend Deprivation Index, that can accentuate your genetic susceptibility to have a higher BMI. And so that was just an example of the sort of gene environment work that I think could be done well in this kind of cohort like Michigan Medicine. So you can do that with census data. There was another study that did it using businesses data, so looking at fast food availability. So that's kind of an example. I also had some other ideas, but I also want to hear from you in terms of like, can you think of any ideas of studies that that might be interesting to do with this data? So I'll come back to that in 1 minute. And then I wanted to say, I mentioned that we're also trying to expand the diversity of the cohort. And so one focus area that we have is looking at Middle Eastern and North African population. We do have a really large Middle Eastern population in Michigan. In Michigan Medicine, though, there is not currently an indicator for if you self-identify as Middle Eastern or North African. People generally are told, just like they do on the census, or did on the census, to just choose like white. So anybody who has that sort of a self-defined race, ethnicity, they would choose white, and we wouldn't know who they are necessarily in Michigan Medicine. So we're sort of working to find those people, but at the same time, we've partnered with Access, the Arab Community Center, to pilot our survey. And we've added some new questions to the survey. And Christine Edrew and I at ISR, she's an adjunct professor there. Some of you might know her. We've been really working on this with Janet and the cohort development team to really try to do like a pilot study where we can enroll. We're hoping to enroll 500 people who will identify as MENA and use that hopefully as pilot data to get a bigger grant to really do a wide scale enrollment of people of this race ethnicity, because we just don't have a lot of research on people who identify that way or who have that ancestry. So we're working on that. We're also trying to add we're working to see if we can add more ways to self-identify race or ethnicity in my chart when you're actually filling out the survey for Michigan Medicine. We're also trying to expand it through targeted enrollment of participants in MGI to do the surveys. We've been using a variety of techniques to try to get people who are a little bit younger, who have more diverse race ethnicity, and people who are of not as affluent demographics, for example. So then that's sort of the end of my presentation. I thought about different ways to use existing data and some new directions we might want to go, but I was also really excited to hear what other people think. So I'm going to stop there and see if people have ideas that they want to talk about.
Thank you, Jen, for that. I'm sorry, I had to miss some of it. I was in a meeting with Christine Arush, which was our centers for our two NIA-funded centers on aging here. One of which she runs, focused on Arab Americans, and then I'm affiliated with the one focused on African Americans, and so it's so ironic.
It's funny. That's so funny.
I guess I was wondering a little bit more if you could talk more about this, I mean, for those of us who aren't geneticists, like how you go about, maybe this isn't a brainstorming question, but like how you think about self-identified race and ethnicity, and sort of how to assess that, and what that, or maybe not versus, but like, and how that relates to things like population stratification and other concerns that you have, or other things that you have to address in terms of looking at your substantive questions. You know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, when you look at things like self-reported race and ethnicity, you can very often you see like someone's genetic ancestry, like what we can glean from their genetic information and what people self-report tend to line up in general pretty well. The thing about self-reported and genetic ancestry is that, self-report tends to be just like a category. So, but ancestry is more of a spectrum, right? And so, for example, when you have a population like African American, a lot of times people will self-report that they're Black, right? So that could be from Africa, or that could be from Jamaica, or that could be from, like different places. So we can actually use the genetic information to very easily see what proportion of someone's ancestry comes from Africa, what proportion comes from Europe, what proportion comes from, some other place. I think both of those pieces of information, when you're doing a genetic study, can be very important. So the genetic ancestry is the key piece when you're doing genetics that you want to control for, to prevent things like confounding due to differences in allele frequencies that you see across, for example, countries, right? Difference in allele frequencies across populations. So from a genetic standpoint, it's always really important to control for that ancestry variable. But I think when we're doing research on the cusp of the social and genetic, that the self-reported race or ancestry or ethnicity becomes very important too, because there's all these different social pieces that are actually being pulled in by that, like the way someone defines themselves or the way someone is being seen in society, right? And so, so it's really interesting because like there is an overlap in those two pieces of information, but there's also a way that that we need to be careful in pulling them apart. And so, so if I'm doing a genetic study, putting in Black isn't going to be enough, because I actually need to know like how much came from which ancestral populations, but that ancestral population piece isn't necessarily going to tell me how much discrimination they've experienced or something like a self-report. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think it also sort of really helps illustrate the, I mean, you did a great job illustrating like the different types of information that are sort of captured by those two different variables and the sort of non-exchangeability between them, which I think is really important, because I think when we think about like need to increase diversity within like genetic based registries, it's like, well, what is that? What are the implications of that? Like why, and I'm not saying this is not a good goal, but like really articulating like, why is that something that's going to help us answer these substantive questions?
Yes. And I think it's both. And I don't know exactly what point you came into the presentation, Bree, but in the beginning, I talked a lot about how we have socioeconomic, like geocoded data on everybody in Michigan medicine. So the data here aren't even just limited to the genetic side. So I think when we talk about, expanding diversity, we're definitely talking about an MGI ancestral diversity, because we don't know a lot about the genetics of, for example, cardiovascular disease in a MENA population. Like we just don't know what's going on there. But the broader goal at Michigan at Precision Health Initiative is actually to expand with diversity in terms of self-reported race ethnicity because of the social reasons, like SCS, because we have sort of a more affluent demographic, I think a little bit in MGI, because they are sort of selected as having surgery here at a really excellent facility. But then also age diversity, because we have an older population. So it's like all of those pieces, but I appreciate that commentary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there other things that people want to know about? Oh, I see a chat. Let's see. So James was saying he sees potential for some extensions of work that he's been involved with in looking at built environment and body weight trajectories in Washington. What about what metabolic indicators do we have, and how up to date is the address information? So Anissa, can you talk just a little bit about the address information?
Yeah, so we have current address information and then addresses and all the historical addresses as well for all of our Michigan medicine patients. So it's very up to date. We also give an encounter count. So say, for example, we have a current address of, say, my house right now, but I haven't been at U of M for 3 years. So we don't really know whether I have moved or I'm staying at that location. So you kind of get an idea based on the encounters that they've had at U of M, how up to date that information is.
And then we do have, there was a question, is there a pediatric sample? We do have a pediatric sample. It's, as far as I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still learning all this data, but in the genetic database, we have a small pediatric sample. In Michigan medicine, I would think, though, we would have the entire pediatric population that's been seen there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Jen. Yep. So in our self-serve tools, you'll see clinical data on all 4.7 million Michigan medicine patients. So there's information on pediatric patients as well as adults.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of things like the metabolic indicators, anything that they're collecting in the clinic, like BMI, blood pressure, and then all the lab results, I would think would be the metabolic pieces that you'd probably want to, and then any diagnoses, of course, right? Anything related to hyperlipidemia, anything like that, diabetes would all be in there. And you could probably see like their date of first diagnosis that it, when it first appears on the health records and things like that. This is great. I
I
think,
added in the chat a link to our documentation website, and you can log in again with using your UMISH password and your UMISH account. But this has some of our user guides as well as data dictionaries. The data dictionaries really go through some of the clinical data that's available for all of our patients. So if you go through that, you'll be able to see what kind of metabolic variables that you're interested in and see if we have that available. If there's something that you don't see there, just reach out to us, because we always have access to more than what we expose. So we can always get you anything else that you might need.
That's really helpful. Abby, well, I'll ask you to grab that link and make sure it's with our, when we're done here, and we can have it on our Canvas site, which is where we archive all these things, so people will have access to that afterwards.
I can also send you a PDF of the PowerPoint if you want, and I'll make sure I put this link in it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that one might have fallen off when I called a few slides, so I will put it in there. I know we're getting close to time. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to say or ask? Well, I think if you have any interest in looking at these data more and you are interested in like thinking about collaborations and things like that, please don't hesitate to email me. Definitely reach out to Anissa or the PH data help at umich.edu that she just put in the chat and is also in the PowerPoint, because like even so far, I gave this similar kind of talk a couple weeks ago, and we've already had people reaching out to Anissa from ISR. So they've been super fantastic. So please let us know if you need anything. Thank you for letting me talk today on short notice.
We love listening to all of your research projects and ideas and finding you all the different resources. So please just email us.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Anissa and Janet. I just want to remind everyone that Anam is presenting her dissertation at 1. I've included the link in Slack and on email, so if you want to join and support her, that would be great. All right, everybody, bye.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.